Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. I'm coming to you again from Hinokicho Park next to Tokyo Midtown, where it's kind of a chilly December day. Despite it being chilly and overcast, it's still quite a beautiful day today. The autumn colors are very beautiful here at the park, and it's very quiet here. I guess due to the fact that it's a work day and a school day, there aren't many people at the park today, so it's nice to enjoy the scenery in quiet and a great time to come out and make a video. The subject of today's video is going to be another half-frame camera, and this particular one is the Minolta Repo, which was released by Minolta in 1962, at the time when the half-frame format had become kind of a craze here in Japan, as well as being popular in other places as well. The half-frame format became popular when Olympus introduced their pin series in around 1958 or so, and the pin was popular enough that it became the pin S and the pin EE, and then the pin EE2, 3, S, and so on. And of course then we had the pin D series, and then finally the pin F series, which was interchangeable lens half-frame camera. So Olympus kind of pioneered the half-frame system, but other camera makers joined in, and of course Minolta was one of those. And Minolta produced a couple of really high-quality half-frame cameras. The half-frame became very popular for a number of reasons. First, it was economical. The half-frame cameras cost less money than the full-frame cameras because they were simpler, required less materials, and I guess less labor to assemble. And also because you could get twice as many exposures on a roll of 35mm film. So, for example, this is if I put a 36 exposure roll of film in this camera, I can get 72 photos from the half-frame format. And nowadays we kind of live in, I guess, good times where people can quite easily afford to buy a 36 exposure roll of film, but in the late 1950s and early 1960s, people were a little bit more tight with their money, and not many people could spring for the extra money for an extra, say, 12 exposures for a roll of film. So, you know, they might buy a 24 exposure roll of film and get 48 exposures. Another good thing about this format is that most people, when they made prints in those days, they were kind of small prints, the kind which you put in photo albums or things like that. And the typical size was, say, 4 by 6 inches. And the half-frame format is quite suitable for making prints this size, or up to 5 by 7. You can make larger prints if you are especially careful with your focus and exposure and such like that, but for the most part, this camera is best suited to those kind of photographs which you keep in a normal photo album. So the Olympus Repo is a kind of an interesting camera, and it's different from a lot of the other cameras at the time because of its operating system. The original pin series was a fully manual camera where you would adjust the aperture and shutter speed manually depending on the lighting conditions, what you were able to read with your eyes or what you could get from a light meter. The later pin series were fully automatic cameras with no manual input at all. This particular camera is a kind of semi-automatic operating camera. It has a mechanical shutter and aperture, but you can kind of vary the speeds depending on how you adjust this ring here, which I'm turning right now. So the Minolta Repo has a Selenium Meter, and there's a meter readout here on the top of the camera. And there's an orange needle which shows in this window, and depending on the light as it goes up or down, the meter needle moves. And to get the best exposure, you would turn this black dial, and that causes this green indicator to move one way or the other. And what you want to do is line up the orange needle in between the two green prongs. And when you have it set that way, then you have the optimal shutter speed and aperture for the given shot. So, but the good thing about this camera is because you can set this manually, you can adjust the exposure compensation a little bit by turning it to one way or the other, say a little bit before or a little bit after the meter needle to give you a little bit more or a little less exposure. So a little bit more flexible than some of the other cameras. So pretty interesting. Another superiority that this camera had, especially over the older pin series, was that it had a film door on the back rather than a removable film back. So the early Olympus pins were kind of like the Nikon F or some Leica cameras where you have to remove the back entirely, or bottom plate or whatever it is, kind of stick it under your arm while you load the film and then put it back on. Having a film door made it much more convenient than the removable backs which some other cameras had. So let's go ahead and take a look, say a more detailed look at the Minolta Repo and how it works and operates. So we'll go ahead and start at the top here, and here we have a film rewind knob here, and it's pretty much identical in appearance to the one which you find on the Olympus pin, except that they painted it black. One of the reasons that they painted it black is because this camera was available in two different colors. You could get the chrome finish like this, or you could get a black anodized finish. The chrome finish seems to hold up better to corrosion and wear than the black finish, though the black finish is quite durable. Olympus had black finish on their half frame cameras, most notably the Pin W, and a few Pin S black cameras were also introduced. But the black paint on these cameras was not very durable, and it was easily scratched or worn away, and it's very difficult to find one of these old cameras where the black paint is still in good condition, if you can find one at all. The Pin W is quite a rare camera around the world, and the Pin S is extremely rare, and even here in Japan I might see maybe one per year come up for sale. So the black finish on the Repo was quite a bit more durable. So, moving over to here, I already mentioned the meter needle readout and how it operates. Over here we have a shoe for mounting a flash, and when you're operating a flash, you can plug in your flash to the PC sync socket here on the bottom. When you operate a flash in this camera, you are supposed to operate the aperture and exposure system more or less in this range here, which is shown by the orange system. And what this will do when you operate in this range, it gives you a fixed shutter speed, which is something like a quarter of a second or a 30th of a second, and you can vary the aperture, say from f2.8 to f11, depending on what the flash recommends or what you have it set at. Right here we have the shutter release button, and this of course accepts a standard cable release. And over on the right side here we have the frame counter window. On the back here we have the viewfinder window, and if you look closely, I don't know if you can see in the camera, I can kind of see it in the monitor, the frame lines here on the back. And this camera doesn't have parallax correction or anything like that. You use outer frame lines when you are focusing in infinity, and it has guide lines which you use when you are focusing at something more closely. The Olympus pin had a superior rangefinder, I guess viewfinder system, because it had projected frame lines, but the Minolta Repo has this light meter here which kind of takes up the space, so they aren't able to fit a projected frame line kind of system into this particular camera. And over here you have the shutter charging and film winding knob, which is pretty much, or dial I should say, which is almost exactly the same as which comes on the Olympus pin. On the bottom here we have the release button to allow you to rewind the film. We have a standard 1/4 inch tripod socket. And over here, this cutout area is made to make it easier to load film into the camera. To load film in the camera, you have to pull up on the latch here and pull the film door open. This one's a little sticky because I haven't really done any work to this camera yet, but it opens like so. And you would put your film canister here, stretch the film across the film chamber, and slide it in this slot here on the take-up spool, and then simply wind the film and fire the shutter until you have the film all the way over and the holes on the both sides of the film are engaged in the teeth here on the take-up spool. Then close the door and make sure to push down the catch. This one isn't automatic like on some other cameras, and if you don't push it down fully, you kind of run the risk of the film door popping open, which wouldn't be nice if you had film loaded in the camera. When you're operating the camera, as I said before, you You point the camera at your subject and you take a light meter reading by simply looking at the top of the camera and then turning the black dial at the base until the marks line up, and the orange needle is between, I guess, the green fork, which is turned when you turn this black dial. In the front here we have a focusing ring, and this camera is a scale focus camera. It's not the rangefinder camera. So the problem with the scale focus camera for people who are just getting into photography, it's kind of difficult for them to get used to it at first, because you have to kind of look and guess the distance between where you are and your subject, and then you have to turn the dial and kind of enter the distance and in this case meters between you and your subject. We have a range of infinity, and close focus on this camera says 0.06 meters, so a little bit more than half a meter away, so fairly close. But this camera features 3 detents here for, I guess, doing presetting the focus, or allowing you to kind of guess what the focus is without actually having to take the camera away from your eye and looking at it. So if you move from infinity to the next setting, that gives you about 5 meters. And 5 meters is kind of the distance you would have for something like a group portrait. So say 3 or 4 of your family members are standing together, and at 5 meters, if they're standing that far away, you can kind of get them from head to toe in the frame. If you turn it to the next click, that gives you a distance of about 3 meters. And so say a person is, a single person is standing far enough away where you can get them from head to toe. At this distance, 3 meters is fine. You'll be able to capture their entire body in the photograph. And as you keep turning, you end up to about 1.2 meters. And this is a good, I guess, a portrait distance, where you're taking a picture of someone's head and shoulders. When you get used to the scale focus camera, you can find that it's actually a little bit faster to use than a rangefinder or an SLR camera, because you simply preset the focus to the distance of the kind of subject you are trying to catch. So say I'm out on the street and I'm doing a little street photography, and I want to be able to catch someone from head to toe. I'll go ahead and simply set the focus at 2 meters, or maybe say between 2 and 5 for a little safety. And all I have to do is just compose and shoot. I don't have to focus it at all. It's quite simple. In this case here, this camera is kind of simple in the exposure system, because you can kind of preset it for the given light, and once you set it, unless the light changes drastically, you don't really have to make any changes to it. So it's actually very fast and quite simple to use. So anyway, that's it for my video about the Minolta Repo half-frame camera. I'll be listing this camera for sale shortly on my online stores, Japan Vintage Camera, my Etsy store, and my eBay store. So if you're interested in buying this camera or another vintage Japanese camera, please check out my stores. I'll post links to my stores in the description below the video. I'm still making more videos for the different cameras which I've received this week. So if you want to see these videos, please subscribe and check back. And if you like this video, of course, please click the like button. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.